What you're looking for in the ocean is a bunch of little black dots squeezed tightly together. I think I can spot one now about 200 metres offshore. It's quite hard to spot. They will get easier to see once they are coming in.
I'm standing on the coast. On one side, I could see a rocky beach below. In front of me, I could see a grandstand. It's a full house of over 300 people sitting, eagerly waiting for the stars of the night to arrive. It's summer in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but it's a cold evening and everyone is wrapped up in warm jackets and beanies.
Do remember to keep your ears peeled. On arrival, these guys will make a quacking sound a bit like a duck, and so most of you will actually be able to hear them before you see them.
What you heard were the sounds of the world's smallest penguins, the little blue penguins. They are called korora in the Maori language. When they come ashore, they use these calls to let the other birds in the colony know that they have arrived. I'm in Ōamaru, a small town on the east coast of the South Island. I'm just a few minutes from the town centre in the Ōamaru blue penguin colony. On the rocky beach, I can see a group of 20-odd penguins swimming ashore. The birds are just 30 centimeters tall. They are back on land after spending the day out at sea fishing. And to get to their burrows where their chicks are waiting for them, they have a short walk up the rocky slope.
There is a roadblock in the form of a fur seal down the very bottom of the ramp, which might mean these guys take a little bit longer to make their way up, but they are here.
We've seen penguins jumping on the seals before, thinking that they're rocks to get into the colony, to jump like over them, and yeah, it's really cute because then the fur seals all of a sudden sit up and bark at them.
This is Philippa Agnew, Science and Environmental Manager at the Oamaru Blue Penguin Colony. Navigating the sleeping seal, the penguins slowly make their way up, some pausing to preen. And they cross together as a group, walking in the iconic waddle in front of the grandstand, much to the excitement of the audience.
I think a lot of people are blown away. Some people come from cities where they don't actually see very many animals at all, and then they come 5 minutes from town and they're seeing hundreds of penguins. I think people are just genuinely blown away by how close the penguins are, how unaffected by people they are, and how natural the colony is. Even though it looks quite artificial in terms of the structures that we use to manage people, the penguins can come and go as they please. So, and that with our messaging around the work we do is all supported by the revenue from the visitors coming, that makes people realise that they're not just coming to see penguins in a zoo or a captive situation, they're actually supporting a wild population where a lot of work is done to support those penguins behind the scene, and that makes people feel really good about coming and seeing them in that space.
My name is Karthik, and this is Tune Into Nature, a podcast bringing you sounds and stories from the wild. We journey through Aotearoa, New Zealand's wild places to meet unique wildlife and hear from the people working to protect them. I hope these stories will inspire you to enjoy nature in your own way. I talked to Philippa and the team at the Oamaru Blue Penguin Colony about their research into the penguins, how the community of Ōamaru is making space for the birds, and how the changing climate is impacting the world's smallest penguins.
Good evening everyone, and welcome to the Oamaru Blue Penguin Colony. My name is Sam and I'll be your host for this evening. Accompanying me will be Tian, and he'll be providing some Mandarin commentary for us tonight. Also in the general stand we'll have Sherry and Georgie, and they'll just be floating during the night. Over in the premium stand we have Elaine, and what she'll be doing is she'll be counting the penguins as they arrive. We also have Robert back in the centre.
You heard from Sam, a guide at the Oamaru Blue Penguin Colony. That night, there were around 300 little blue penguins coming in, and as I walked back through the colony, the birds were out and about, walking around, active and loud. I'd never imagined that the little blue penguins would have this range of sounds from growls to screeches to almost braying. The penguins use these calls to recognize other individuals in the colony or to defend and claim their territories. The site of the penguin colony was once a quarry, and some members of the community were not keen on having the penguins here.
It was a quarry from the 1800s, but it was in operation until around the late 1960s, early 70s. And at that stage, when it was disestablished as a quarry, the penguins started occupying that site. I mean, they would have been there in small numbers in the clay bank before the quarry existed, but basically opening that quarry space up allowed a bigger space for the penguins to live in. And it was interesting at the time, and then the decade or so following, some of the local councillors and the mayor at the time were very pro it remaining a commercial site. And I often quote these fantastic Ōamaru Mail articles in 1985 where the mayor was quoted saying that the penguins were trespassing. But luckily there were members of the community, Department of Conservation, Forest and Bird, some really keen penguin advocates, and a local councillor as well pushed back, and they pushed for the area to be set aside for the penguins.
Thanks to those dedicated individuals and groups, the little blue penguins went from trespassers around town to becoming popular stars of Oamaru. Philippa has been working in the conservation and research of the little blue penguins here for 17 years.
So I was actually sea kayaking in the Abel Tasman National Park, and a little penguin swam up to the kayak. And yeah, I just remember thinking how cool it was, and it was completely unaffected by us, but it was a little bit curious at the same time. So it sort of popped up beside the kayak and then swam around us and then swam away. So yeah, I thought that was really special to be able to see them in such a natural environment and doing their thing. It was really cool. Through my early 20s, I guess I was exposed a little bit more to penguins because I saw a few in the wild, and it sparked an interest in seabirds and penguins, definitely.
For research, there are 2 colonies monitored by Philippa and her team, one around the viewing area and the other nearby at Oamaru Creek. And both the colonies have nesting boxes put out for the penguins.
So naturally the penguins would dig a burrow into the soil or sand, and we provide nesting boxes because they won't collapse or flood the same way a natural nest might, and their breeding success has been shown to be higher in those nesting boxes than in natural sites. Probably it helps them at the start of the breeding season too, because they don't have to excavate their nest. It's already there, they just can keep coming back and using those spaces. So it probably makes it a little bit easier, as well as helping increase their breeding success. And so we manage both colonies the same by installing nesting boxes and then going through each nesting box every week and checking the contents of each.
During the day, I went along to Oamaru Creek.
The Ōamaru Creek runs just north of here out to the sea, and when this colony was set up, as well as the quarry, it was set up because there were concentrations of penguins in this area. The overall size is about approximately 1 hectare, and we have 300 nesting boxes in this space. And it's nicely fenced, it keeps people and predators out. We do some trapping in here to remove stoats, ferrets, weasels, rats, those sorts of animals. So it's pretty well protected. And historically, there would have been, of course, penguins all over the country in terms of, the coastal space, but they're reduced now to areas where they are protected because of predators and because of loss of habitat by urban development. So we have a fully marked population here where all the adults they used to be flipper banded, but now they're microchipped using the same technology that we use in domestic animals now. So they're all identified, and then we record the number of eggs that they lay and then the number of chicks that hatch. And then each week we'll weigh a sample of chicks. So not necessarily weighing every chick, because that would be quite labour intensive when we have hundreds.
New egg! New egg!
New egg!
Woo!
That's Beth and Tia celebrating finding a new egg in a nest box. They are helping out with the monitoring and they walk around the colony checking the nest boxes and weighing the chicks.
So these guys are 3 weeks old and they're 660 and 740 grams. So they're big for their age. At about 5 weeks they're usually about a kilogram, which is the same weight as a normal adult or an average adult. So they grow very, very quickly.
Adult penguins bring in food for their chicks, and by weighing the chicks, the team can make sure that the chicks are healthy.
So yeah, this is a lot busier than it usually is. This colony in the winter takes us about half an hour because there's just no birds home, whereas today it's taken us, 4 or 5 hours with all the chicks to weigh.
You do sort of notice some of the cool behaviours and characteristics of them, and some of them are really, really nice and some of them are less so. But no, it's been a great job so far and always fun. If there's an opportunity to work with penguins, who wouldn't want to do it? So it works pretty much perfectly for the time being.
In some nest boxes, Beth and Tia come across some really tiny penguin chicks.
Yeah, so when they're this little, this one's 2 weeks old, so he's just fitting into the palm of my hand. When they're like a week old, they're even smaller, so it would probably fit perfectly, whereas his head's kind of sitting over my fingers. So 200 grams is very good for second weigh. So 150 and 200, so that one's smaller, which is fine because it's just the second week. Yeah, they're all doing pretty good at the moment.
Closer to 8 weeks old, that their weight sometimes drops off because at that point the parents stop feeding them and trying to get them to leave. So you just see a little bit of weight loss then, won't you?
That's
normal.
Usually a good sign.
Yeah.
Because it means that they're getting ready to leave, and they'll get food for themselves.
Little blue penguins usually start nesting around May and can start laying eggs between May and September.
In Ōamaru, every year is different for our penguins, and it's determined by how much food and the food availability out at sea. So if there's plenty of fish nearby in good abundance and they're not foraging too far to get that fish, then they will start breeding early. And that means that it's going to be a good season because when the penguins have finished laying their first eggs and raised their first set of chicks and fledge those chicks, they can then lay a second set of eggs and raise 2 more chicks before the season finishes. So potentially having 4 chicks per season if they start breeding early enough. So that's why we've actually started doing a little bit more research in that space, trying to find out what might be those triggers.
One of those factors could be storm events, and with climate change, storms are more frequent, which could affect the penguins.
And so the impact that storms have is on the turbidity and the murkiness at sea. So when there is a consistently large storm event that increases the significant wave height, that wave action brings a lot of sediment up into suspension in the sea. And we have a relatively shallow sea inshore off Ōamaru. So when we have those storms with that condition happening, that sediment can remain in suspension for quite a long time if that storm continues for a long time and is really intense.
Part of the scientific name of the little blue penguins is Euryptula, which means good little diver. And these birds are great at spotting and pursuing fish underwater. But in muddy waters,
that's going to be really damaging because they need to be able to see their prey to capture them, and they're targeting a small schooling fish, so probably in that murky water those schools of fish break up a little bit, and we can see the impact immediately. With a storm event, the number of penguins coming ashore starts to decline, and if it's during the breeding season they will abandon their nests and they'll essentially restart their breeding, delaying it another 6 weeks after the storm event. And to be honest, it doesn't actually have to be that intense. This year we saw just regular disturbances in the sea, and we could see that it was quite murky for most of the winter, which is one of the reasons I think they were quite late in their starting of egg laying this season. And combining that with increasing sea surface temperatures, that will have an impact as well, because the fish that they eat, it's better spawning conditions for those species of fish in cooler sea surface temperatures. There's probably going to be a number of impacts from climate change on these species.
What we do on land also affects these birds at sea.
Soil erosion is massive for New Zealand because historically we have reduced the amount of forest and turned it into pasture, and the amount of soil that's lost on pasture is a lot, and it of course naturally is going to end up in the ocean because it comes down, goes through the rivers, ends up in the ocean. And probably other things like dams aren't really helping that situation, because a lot of the fine sediments get through the dams and end up in the ocean, and that is probably what is brought up into suspension in those events. So I mean, the processes on land are improving in terms of riparian planting and encouraging tree planting, and I think that just needs to be part of our focus of land management going forward, is definitely to have a conscious thought around what we're doing on land is definitely going to impact out at sea through that erosion.
Little blue penguins are very much a part of people's lives in Oamaru. I walked to a street lined with Victorian-era buildings on both sides.
So we're in Harbour Street in the historic precinct in Ōamaru. I have a shop here.
This is Dawn Brown. She owns a gift shop, and one day she had a surprise visitor.
When we first opened the shop, it was reasonably quiet, and I was behind the counter doing some paperwork. I could see something out of the corner of my eye, and I looked under one of our displays, and there was a little blue penguin. I don't know when he came in, but yeah, he was just under one of the displays along the far side of the shop. So he'd obviously got a bit lost. So I picked it up and put it in a box and called Philippa down at the penguin colony. She came and collected it. And then they released it back out to sea. We think it was a juvenile, so it may have come out of its nest and lost its way, because they don't really have a sat-nav like we do in cars now.
This impromptu visit from the penguin inspired Dawn to create a children's book telling the story.
To educate children about wildlife and that it's living all around us. So the first book was from about the adult penguins laying an egg, raising the chick, and then the penguin coming into the shop, and the story about what happened to him. I called it Percy because I thought that was quite a good name. It's also my maiden name. I invited a friend to illustrate it for me because I did try, but I'm not that good at. I can do art, but it wasn't consistent.
The first book was called Percy, the Little Penguin, and the second book, Percy's Return, follows the story of Percy becoming an adult penguin.
Yeah, that's how it grew, and we've printed it locally with a printer in town. So we've kept it local, and I donate 50 cents from each book sold back to the penguin colony for conservation. The penguins were probably here long before human beings. So we've built around their habitat, so we have to live with them. So it's good that we can integrate together.
In 1993, when the monitoring began, there were just 33 breeding pairs of penguins in the colony around the viewing area. This has grown to around 280 breeding pairs last year. This is great news, as the penguin numbers are in decline in areas where they are not protected.
We do have room to expand. We've got room to put more nesting boxes in if we need to, and I see that will happen going forward because of the way the population increase has occurred up until now. I think the populations will continue to increase. So we'll probably put in, I'm not sure, maybe 70 or 80, maybe even 100 more nesting boxes in that space. So we'll be able to help grow the population by expanding through that area, which is really great. Working here helps me not only support the penguin populations that we manage, but I also advocate as much as I can for all of the other wildlife that we have. We have otago shags in the harbour here in Ōamaru, and red-billed gulls have recently set up a really large breeding colony around the Cape from us. So it's really great to see other species in our area thriving as well.
You're listening to Tune Into Nature with me, Karthik. You can learn more about the Oamaru blue penguin colony or support their work by adopting a little penguin if you'd like. You can do this online, and there are links to this in the show notes. While I was in the colony, I also had a chance to film the little blue penguins swimming and walking to their burrows. So head over to our social media pages to watch some penguin videos. There are links in the description. I'd love to hear what you think about this show. So if you have any feedback, please leave a comment on our social media platforms. We will be back with more great stories about wildlife and nature, so please follow the podcast on your favorite listening app, and while you're there, please leave a rating. That would really help. The podcast is kindly supported by the New Zealand Lottery Grants Environment and Heritage Fund, administered by Te Tari Taiwhenua, the Department of Internal Affairs. Supported by Professor Nancy Longnecker, Science Communication, University of Otago, and ORFM Dunedin. Thanks for listening.